Thank you to everyone at MacDowell. This space is so nice and cozy. I have not been here until today, and it's such a nice gem in Chelsea to have. You guys have been so great in helping us organize this talk and create this platform and kind of recognize the intersection between our two programs, Times Square Arts and MacDowell, and then in turn have the conversation still be artist-led. So I'm excited for the conversation that's going to unfold tonight. Times Square Arts is the public art program in Times Square, as the name implies. We are a small but mighty team. You have Liam Archer here, our project manager. Brittany Collins, our former assistant director. She's so embarrassed. Christina Daniels, our assistant director, is here. But we really are, we act like we're our own nonprofit. We're really a department within the Times Square Alliance, which is the business improvement district that kind of oversees Times Square in conjunction with the city, and that's how we kind of expand and pull on the resources that allows us to present public art in this very iconic space. We present installation and sculpture, performance, but really the anchor to Times Square Arts is the Midnight Moment program. It's been running since 2012. It started on about 8 displays and then has grown to a presentation nightly on about 95 displays. We've featured the work of over 140 different artists. We feature a new artist every month, and it's really just this 3-minute monumental takeover of Times Square and, you know, a public art moment that happens 364 nights a year from 11:57 to midnight, if you haven't caught it. And I know how people talk about Times Square. That's okay. We've heard it all. I've probably said it all myself. I'm a convert. But I think, you know, yes, sure, Times Square can maybe be a soulless corporate hellscape, but it's also so many other things. And it's really, the way that it evolves and the way that it's so magical if you let your guard down and let it be magical is just always kind of amazing to me. And I think that Midnight Moment is a really strong counter-narrative to some of the cliches about Times Square. And one of those reasons is that I've been saying this lately, that Midnight Moment is really a people-powered program. You know, it only happens because a lot of people are saying yes to the same thing at the same time. It's the sign operators from these competing and disparate mega corporations that donate their time every night and say yes to the art. It's the artists that have to navigate the kind of narrow constraints of those mega corporations. It's the videographers and photographers that run out in the middle of the night week after week to document this very ephemeral art experience. And of course, you know, it's the 3,000 people that are gathered in the plazas that, you know, kind of tacitly agree to pause and look up together. So it's a really special program, and I'm very happy to also say that we did our fanciest thing ever, which is publish a book on the program. So it really kind of preserves the legacy of that ephemeral program in print. So check it out on your way out if you haven't already. And that is kind of in part why we're here to talk tonight. We tapped not only to hear from like Pamela Council and Kambui and Peter Burr, but we tapped the writer for the introduction of the publication, Charlotte Kent, to also be our moderator tonight. She's an incredible arts writer, but she also has the street cred of growing up in Hell's Kitchen. She teaches the Midnight Moment program as a part of her syllabus at Montclair State University. And she's just an all-around great conversationalist, so you're in store for something special. So I'll bring her out, and then I think she's going to bring out our artists.
Hi, everyone. So yeah, I'm Charlotte. Gosh, and I'm already getting things off to a kicking start. All right. Welcome to Tuesday and to the conversation. It is such a pleasure to be here with these lovely artists who I'm going to introduce in a moment. One of the things I wanted to sort of start us off with is that the joy of grouping is finding community. But the danger is assuming likeness. In the conversation tonight, I'm particularly aware of that. It's a danger that moderators fall into all the time. The variety of practices in these 3 artists is part of what I think is beautiful about what MacDowell does, what Midnight Moment has done in its breadth of displays. And yet, as I was sitting with the practices and thinking about what we might talk about, one thing that really came up for me was that each of them unexpectedly takes me to some deep, weird, winding associations. And so as a part of the introduction, each of them will have a slide. You can read their official bios up there, look them up online. But I'm just going to say a few words about some of the places that I went to. So Peter, I think Peter's first, if we can. Yes, there we go. So they'll each sort of talk about their midnight moment, but I wanted to just say that Peter's early computer game aesthetic, the binary color palette, the rectilinear design, the simple graphics, it isn't nostalgic, as something I said in one of our first conversations. The architectural visuals express the structural logic of our machine systems, but also a sociologic, very much at odds with itself, that we are confronting. It's outcome-oriented, yet driven by feedback loops and instability. Similarly, language has an order and a pattern, as recent tech has shown, but what we celebrate about it is its poetic turns. And speaking of turning and thinking about Pamela, I did not do my nails today, and I thought about that as like a whole thing, only to realize that I was still doing my nails by not doing them, because everyone has a nail story, biting them, finding them. We have preferences short, long, square, curved. Archaeologists discovered Egyptian mummies with gilded nails from 5000 BCE. Babylonian warriors in 3000 BCE had solid gold manicures. War paint, huh? Or, as Pamela once said, bad bitch armor, which I appreciate. These aesthetics take craft and care. Nails are things we ignore. We read into them. We care for. It's funny how something so small gives us so much to chew on. Kambui's kaleidoscopic skies got me thinking about space and time. The way that I take comfort sometimes thinking about how people that I love who are far away are still under the same cloak, but how I've sometimes wanted to stop the clouds, whose movement makes everything seem so fleeting. Clouds also indicate weather and seasons, and a way of organizing our own action vis-a-vis something we didn't and can't construct. It's an entirely different logic than the one that has us gathered here tonight at 6:30 p.m. on March 11th in 2025. The disparateness of their practices doesn't undermine being able to come together. And I'm holding space for that because at this point in time, because of the differences we observe, we might also find a remarkable value that art offers for society, one that we need. So with that, I'm going to ask each of them to present a little bit about their midnight moment and maybe share some image from that overall experience that stayed with you.
Thank you for that introduction, Charlotte. Hey, everybody. Gosh, there's so much to talk about in this multitude of social space and also the practices that we share. When I think about bringing together Times Square as an institution and organization and MacDowell Colony, for me, these are experiences that span 15 years of my experiences. My time at MacDowell was a time when I was experimenting with animation and performance, and thinking about how some of the most interesting places that animation as a craft was being expanded was in performance and in installation, which led me to thinking about video games and led me to the work that I presented for Times Square Midnight Moment, which was a piece that I actually developed having no idea where it would go at a residency in Lower Manhattan at a place called Three-Legged Dog. So we'll get to see a little bit of that, but I'm very happy to kind of pull these threads together with you all.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the intro. Thanks for being here, everyone. I was invited to make my midnight moment by the curator, Anna Harsani, who was like, let's do something with nails. And acrylic nails and fingernails as a material and subject is something that I've been working with since 2008. And every time I do a really intense piece with them, I'm like, I'm done with nails, and then something, something or someone calls me, and I'm re-engaged. So that's what happened in 2021. I'd finished MacDowell, oh my gosh, December 2019. Yeah, like just in time, exactly, exactly. Um, so they were really kind of close together, and I do want to acknowledge that today is the 5th COVID birthday, right? Um, and the call from Anna and Jean and Brittany was like, we want you to do something fun because you know how to like make things fun, even when it's really dark. And I was like, okay, I'll do it. So that was the goal, and I chose to do this dedication that lifted up Amber Wagner as this inspirational voice who uses her nails and her hands to talk to us online. And yeah, it sort of our work together expanded from there.
Hello. Um, it was really both of these places have a special spot in my heart. I used to think MacDowell was only for writers because I was just around writers when I was a teenager, and I thought this was what that place was. And later get into fine art, and when I get the opportunity to go, I remember I was working on a film for the Newark Museum. It was a planetarium, and I was gonna do this kind of stitch video thing that I had never done and didn't know anybody else who had done. And they were like, "Sure, come on down and play in the dirt in the woods." And the thing that I took away, I eventually made the piece, but that community from MacDowell it's so close to my heart. I just hung out with Josh Berman, who I met in 2017, who was there at MacDowell with me, like yesterday. And so these conversations are things that continue and are so important to me. And then when I started to think about Midnight Moments, and I talked to Jean about this, the first time I saw Midnight Moments, I was just, I'm a walker. I'm a New Yorker and I'm a walker, so I walk around. And I think I came upon it just, after like a blizzard or something. And me and my boy is just in, 42nd Street. And we're like, man, we own this town. And nobody is out. And it's like midnight and it's freezing cold. And then it all changes. And it is one of the most surreal moments, especially with no warning. There was nobody out there. And we had to look at each other to really see, is this really happening? You see what I'm seeing? And it would be like another year before I would find out formally about this program. And then we were supposed to do it early 2020, like March or like April or something. That didn't happen. And then even when we did, it was so amazing that people could come out and spread out across the 10, 12 blocks and have this kind of engage. I mean, you could park on 45th Street in September 2020. And so everything was so like incredibly surreal. So it was a beautiful kind of moment. And I went, over and over, like probably 10, 12 times, and just like held space with people. And so it was really beautiful.
I want to speak a little bit more about that people thing, because I think it's important. As Jean mentioned, I grew up in Hell's Kitchen, so I was going through Times Square all the time as a kid. Even before, I had a beeper at one point, but like even before that, like it was just sort of one of those things, like I just left the apartment and you go wandering, right? That was a thing that we used to do. And one of the things that I always say is that New York is actually much more community oriented than people often realize. Like, the people on your street, the unhoused people. Like, people have a place, and we navigate each other in this very complicated, unspoken way. Weirdly, actually, when you start to articulate it, it's sometimes when it starts to fracture a bit. And Times Square was like that for me, you know. I knew a couple of the street vendors. I knew if weird things happened, which shops I might duck into. I was young, so I got a kick out of the, you know, triple X shops, like, ooh. It was all a part of the sort of weird life that is part of what I think we all love about New York as well. And I'm winding here just to say, you know, part of what I think is so significant to the arts and to some of the things that you all have done is also this sense of community, these other people and touchstones who have been a part of the practice, right? We celebrate the artist, right? But as we all know, we do things because other people are cheering us on, or we want to vindicate someone who hasn't. I mean, it's true. Sometimes that's motivating. And you've already spoken a little bit about some of the influences, like people you've connected with around these projects in your art practice. But actually, even in the context of each of your midnight moments, there were specific other people who were sort of on your mind or connected. And I was just wondering if you might each speak to what it's like to, I don't know, have your own creative practice, but also be brushing up against honoring or referencing.
Yeah, I can speak to that really quickly because I mentioned, so my project Pattern Language that I ended up showing for Midnight Moment was a project that came in the middle of something that I'm still honestly developing with a bunch of collaborators. And as my career extends onward, more and more I think about this tension between being, on one hand, the masthead of a practice, but on the other hand, very much not alone. And so I think about, as an artist, how can I create a culture that values everyone that's involved in making that, while also balancing the irony of, like, it's Peter Burr's Midnight Moment, right? And so there's an element of equity compensation, but also to shout out some of the people involved in Pattern Language. I mentioned I developed that piece during a 2-month residency at 3LD with a programmer named Mark Fingerhut, with a sound designer named John Also Bennett. There were, I believe, just 2 evenings where we got to experience Pattern Language, where there was a hot dog vendor who had speakers on that. I don't know if you guys still have this, but we had a special event where we would press play just at the right moment and get to experience Pattern Language with the score that John made, which was extremely important because that piece was built in a black box theater, and we just lived in there for 2 months. I was working with video game technology for the first time and trying to figure out how to make something that really felt alive, while also basically living just off of Wall Street. And so meditating on the crowd patterns that live there. When this opportunity to consider Midnight Moment as a canvas arrived, it just felt like this perfect confluence. And as a New Yorker, what an amazing thing. I mean, I went down probably 20 times. And as someone who identifies this city as my home, it was so validating and beautiful to get to share that space as something that for that time being was this quiet home that I could share.
Just before I just think it might be helpful. Pattern Language is a book from the 1970s that is about urban design and sort of sets out 300 or something, like 300 patterns of how to organize social structures that was then sort of applied in all these other ways. Yeah,
Christopher Alexander and a few collaborators whose names I do not know, apropos to this, wrote this book that was part of a trilogy through a design process in the 70s, thinking about cybernetics or feedback systems, and thinking about how, as architects, we could think about designing the space around us by giving concepts and tools to people that are actually building them. And so this was a really interesting thing for me to sit with while living in New York City and watching, or perhaps just sitting with the feeling of actually not having much control over my built environment, which felt really appropriate in Times Square.
Do you want to speak about how you came to sort of connect and be interested and inspired by Sure.
I I wanted to first mention the most recent post I saw from Amber, who's like known for these 4-inch long acrylic nails. And she does these like close-up videos where you can see the sky above her nails. She posted something, and she does this like inspirational, motivational speech, like, "You go, girl, you got this, like, don't give up," as she's talking with her hands. And I thought that that was like exactly what we needed in that pandemic moment. And also, I was really inspired by Ilana Harris Babu's work, and how she transforms these cooking shows and like kind of commercial presentation programs into art. So I was like, ooh, what if I invite Amber into my visual world, into my material world? It's like a sandbox, like, come play. So we did. We like set up pink lotion fountains and beads and a lot of my materials that I use frequently, and we just played all day, and then showed what we shot. But Amber's most recent post was really sad, but also really touching. It was a couple days ago, and she's like, "You guys have been asking what I'm up to, and COVID's been hard, and this shit has been hard, and you're looking for the nails, and I haven't been getting my nails done." And like, she's never said something like that. It's always like, "You got this," you know, it's always polished. And I was like, whoa. Like, as I was thinking about this panel, like, that is the realness. Because the whole thing, the whole story I was telling with nails was like, for some of us, you know, welcome to this world of survivors. If you survive the pandemic, you're a survivor too now. For some of us, nails is like all we can do. That's our place of control, and it's our like only maintenance we can do, and we're gonna keep that up. So I thought, like, yes, seeing Amber say like it's not about the nails right now was kind of profound. So anyway, yeah, I wanted to put her on the Times Square screens. She deserves it. She's that girl.
I think often for myself, I'm interested in sight. Like I said, I'm a walker. I go to places. I go return, and I try and develop a relationship with a work of art. Like the works of art I've been looking at since I was 5. Like in New York, like I go and I look. One time, I saw my brother recently, maybe like 5-6 years ago, and he was still making fun of this thing that happened to me when I went to the Brooklyn Museum, and they had moved these sculptures, and I thought they took them. I thought somebody just like rolled up and stole them, and they were gone. And so I started crying, and I just started bawling right in the middle of the Brooklyn Museum. And this security guard came over, and he was like, I know what you're looking for. And then like just took me, and my brother was a teenager, so we all followed him. And he showed us where these where the work was. And it's funny because you have these relationships that develop when you have a site, you have a place to return to. And so a lot of the conversations are not necessarily with said person over, specifically, but an idea over time. So like somebody that I've been rolling with recently is Leo Koresh, who did this movie called Holy Motors that I love. And it's about this, to me, I think it's about cultivating chaos and being unfixable. And so in my, like, I roll with a crew all the time. Like, I always have people in my head. So that,
Me too, it's okay.
You show up and you're like 25 deep. And so that's one of the people that are with me. And so when I go to make work, I think about that. I think about, people like Hammonds and other, and also somebody like Maya Lin, who the idea of you can create a landscape in this valley, this like techno valley, that is supposed to be super temporary, but you can somehow, me and Gene talked about this, like, I wanted to just do one sky. I wanted to do something that would stop you. And if it could stop you and pause you and fix you just like for a second, like slow you down, you could carry that and come back to that. So that idea of like, if you can make a kind of time that can be put in a pocket and then opened up as needed, I think that's the people that I'm naming, that's why they're with me, you know. There was somebody else that, Leo Koresh, and Hanif, what am I doing? Hanif Abdul Rakib, in his last book, he said, find a place that you are unkillable and jump to it. And I was like, that's going on the wall.
I like this idea of the unfixable, right? I think it's I've been thinking about this a lot in the sense that there's so much that feels very solutions-oriented right now. Maybe always, right? I feel like that's probably the purpose of society on some level. But anyway, I keep thinking about, like, you know, the seeking solutions and wanting solutions, where I'm sometimes like, I'm not quite sure what solution you think you're going to find. I'm not sure what you're asking. I don't know what the question is. I don't know what, how can you get, I'm not sure we're on the same page about what the problem is or whatever. And I've been thinking about how to think through unfixability, like this, and I think maybe that's one of the reasons I love Midnight Moment, right? It's like this 3-minute thing, you're there, but you can't stop it, you can't pause it, you can't be like, oh, I just want to, that. You can't watch it again unless you come back the next day, right? Like, it's this very sort of unfixed thing. And yet, of course, being artists, you have to fix something so that you can be like, here it is, this is the artwork, right? So I was just wondering, like, how do you move through that? Like, how do you find how do you think about the unfixed in the fixing of an artwork?
Well, it's just playing jazz a little bit, right? I mean,
I know I went off script a little bit. I just, like, you brought it up.
Well, I mean, I can speak to that briefly, and I mean, I bring up playing music because I think there is a part of when maybe we can conjure MacDowell here and thinking about being in a cabin where nobody's gonna mess with you. Maybe someone will come bring a picnic basket, but they're gonna leave that on your doorstep. Yeah, it's like cool. You throw another log on the fire, and you're going into this space and you're making work. And when I think about I'll go back to pattern language and the work that I was making for Midnight Moment. This was not something that I was making to fix anything. I was having ideas, and of course I have my own way that I would love to feel like God and build this world, but I did not have Times Square in mind. That would be wild. But then I do have these reference points, and I have these stories, and I think about a story that one of my old animation professors told me about in art school. He was working on a film called Maxwell's Demon. This was in 1984. He took a trip to Moscow and wrote about how profound it was for him to go to this major city, and there were no billboards, there were no advertisements everywhere. And I thought about this quality of being in a space in an urban center where you're not having shoes or makeup or anything sold to you. There's a simplicity to it. And so thinking about pattern language operating in Midnight Moment, I was really happy to think about, just for a few minutes, to offer this proposal in a very subtle way of what happens if you strip the color out of this and just let this space be something abstract that reflects you back, that's not trying to sell you anything. So, you know, it's not proposing a fixture, but it is proposing or planting a seed of what alternatives look like.
How did you see people responding to that?
I mean, I think every night somebody complained they thought they were gonna have a seizure. Because I don't know if it's playing behind me, but yeah. But I mean, it's a range of experiments, and I think this is one of the challenges being an artist who, when I go into my studio, I just let myself absorb into my own psychology, and it's not a mainstream psychology. So the things that fascinate me which sometimes are kind of scary and sometimes are kind of alarming. I mean, to go back to collaboration, this is also why it's so important to build relationships with institutions so that we're kind of working that trust together. And something I really loved about that experience with Midnight Moment is y'all had staff that were there to field those concerns. So it wasn't just like this punk resistant, like, we don't care, this is what you're seeing. There was something discursive. There were people there to field that conversation. And as you know, like at midnight, it's quiet there. I know during COVID, it's even quieter, but it's always kind of peaceful at midnight in Times Square.
There was something you brought up about being in your studio, and Peter, you brought it up, but being in your studio, and you said that you try and build, you end up building a non-conventional, like a non-mainstream aesthetic or like logic. Jeffrey Gibson posted something recently, and he's just like, you know, this is the, oh no, I don't think it's Jeff. I think it might be Nayland Blake. You know what? One of these wonderful artists said, you know, the studio is one of the few places you can really be honest with yourself, and you have to mind that. You have to always be brutally honest with yourself in these spaces. And it got me to writing about this idea of the cultivation of honesty, that it's not just something that is like an on or off, that you have to mine it. And I just wonder what that process is for everyone, you know, like for you, Pam, and Pamela, and Peter, just like how, not the ends, because I think it's sort of like time. You brought up time. When we look at the work on the wall as a terminus of time, as opposed to an inflection point, like a temporal inflection point, or something that you can take and put in your pocket and then pop out later and then have another temporal experience, then it plays. When it's an end, it doesn't really make sense to me. When it's the end, like the thing on the wall, that's the end of this finite time. And I think honesty is also this thing of like, you know, I honestly thought this thing was stolen in this museum. And to me, it was gone, it was gone forever. Like it did not exist anywhere else. And I couldn't, I know, right? You see me going back. I was like, how did they move it? It's 1,000 trillion pounds. And then there's this other like thing that gets developed. So how do you all, if you care to share, or if you have a kind of language around that kind of mining or the practice of honesty for yourself, how do you make room for that?
I think for me, the pathway there is through play. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it's, I have to set up a game for myself that will sort of like lead me on a hopscotch to feeling safe being honest. Because it's not necessarily like the first thing. So yeah, I just set a little course and I'm like, okay, that's where I'm gonna dance. Yeah, and then it's playing. And being at MacDowell, like the dinners were so intimate. So good. Like I feel like that's why I connected to so many people. Cause like everyone's doing their own, whatever their course is to honesty all day long. And then you come for dinner and it's like, it's humans, but it's like jarring because there's no internet also, and you're just like, yeah, salad. How do we, like your minds just meet because you're in that zone, and it was so powerful. It's like so powerful to just be in that cipher. And I think that was really a moment for me when I realized I need to work collaboratively. And the Times Square work was like the first time I really did that. Really had a team that was like, okay, we'll jump into your brain. Let's figure it out. And it was scary. I was like, oh, okay. we can do this. And so, yeah, I think finding people to play with and like playing together builds trust in a profound way. I'm in constant conversation with my friend Janaea Kemper, who's a game designer and game theorist, who does work about live action role playing games as being a site for transformation. And so, yeah, long answer, play.
I mean, I think structured play can be very liberating. Play is like such a fundamental human condition. So I've actually just come back to New York for 24 hours to come here. I'm at a residency in Montreal at a place called Phi Center, and I'm the only artist in resident there, so I don't have the luxury of these dinners. But one thing that has been great, I'm working with a team of people at Phi Center, and they know that I study games, and I'm trying to work through this question of how to dig into the core of what all of these experiments, these formal experiments are. And so I've been collecting games to play to actually dissolve some of these blocks. Brian Eno came out with a card game called Oblique Strategies, just kind of draw a card every day and respond to it. I also have this kids game called Story Cubes. You roll dice, there's symbols. It's just a way to kind of break out of a habituated path to confront these intuitive decisions in the moment. Play, I think, is very important. What else do we do in the studio?
What else is there?
Work.
I love it. When we went at MacDowell, we played. So the dinner, everybody be in their own head, and then we come to dinner, and everybody's got that glazed over. Oh wait, how'd you get here? How'd you get here? That kind of. We eat, and then I love a game. I love a game. So we played set at MacDowell. This is game that is the addiction. So much so, the MacDowell. We have a group chat that we still keep up, and we'll call and be like, oh snap, such and such is at the Kennedy Center, such and such is here. Oh. We get all excited, and someone said, what are you doing? And I was like, well, I'm playing set, and they were like, FaceTime right now. So then we all try to FaceTime, and it was straight havoc. We're trying to play. There's people in Australia, and then that's when I realized there are people in Australia, there are people in Southeast Asia on this chat. There are people where it's like midnight, some people it's like early in the morning, some people are like, it's not fair because I have a time delay, and so you're calling set, and so that game is still the rubber band between us. It's amazing.
Just on another sort of free associating here, way too much probably, but just midnight, right? So like, I love that midnight moment is at this 3-minute period right before midnight. Is midnight a time of day for each of you? Like, is that a time you regularly encounter? I think you do from the sound of it. It seems like you're walking late at night all the time, but Peter, Pamela, is that like a time of day you regularly experience?
I'm usually asleep by then, which I mean, when I think about going, Yoshi Sodioka had a midnight moment recently, and it was very special, in part because I had to prepare myself all day to stay awake for a midnight moment. But then it was this really special thing that I could share with him and a small group of friends, so it does become this little pocket.
I have recently had to have a bedtime. And so for the last 6 months, I haven't been seeing midnights, and it's heartbreaking because I'm a late night girly, but no, not anymore.
I'm definitely, I was like, yes, thank you, Gene, thank you, finally. All my friends who are like, yeah, I'm going to sleep. I'm like, I got this art show. Starts at midnight, and then we can go eat, then we can go karaoke, then we can wake your kids up and go party, take them to school. They're like, slow it down. But it was nice to be, especially one of the things there's a lot of things that I thought were lost during the lockdown and during COVID, and one of them was nightlife. And I think when people think about nightlife, they think of the club and they think of the park. But New York is a place where like you can go and get tea at 4 o'clock in the morning. You can get like, I don't know, what are the potato things? latkes. That's what I was trying to think of. I don't really, but that's one of the things that we do, at Veselka, and I'm like, it's not my jam, but it was my friend's jam. So it's just like, you can be out and it's a very different city. And so it was one of the first times that we could go out at like midnight, and people rode their bikes because nobody was riding the train still. And so it was special in that way, among others.
I think it's notable, actually, that we're sort of recalling that moment, as Pamela reminded us, that it's this anniversary, because it was, I was going to say, there were things I really enjoyed about the lockdown. There was something very New York about it. It felt like the city, I don't know, you could walk it, you could, drive in it. Like, it was just, there was something about the city was just very there. The structure of the city, because somehow all the busyness of it was sort of quieted down. I went to the Met a lot because no one did. You put on a mask, but it was like empty. I'd never been in the Met when it was so empty. Like, you could just keep doing that with all these museums. So there was something very intimate about that period too. And I think all of you have in different ways talked about the intimacy of Midnight Moment, of being there with friends, of showing up for other friends' Midnight Moment, and the way in which you're all there for this really brief period. You can't be late, right? Like, if you're late, you're gonna miss it. It's like really not a thing. And I guess, I really enjoyed the sort of pocket that you were talking about, like this idea of things that you can put in your pocket and hold on to. And pull them back out in the way in which Midnight Moment is that. And so what is, like, from the whole experience of your Midnight Moment, from the sort of conceptualizing of it all the way to maybe the last time you saw your own, is there an image for you, like one of those things about that experience that is something you pull out of your pocket every once in a while for your practice or your life or your being these years later?
Well, I think a lot about the site of Times Square being such a unusual place to show contemporary art, because while a lot of the billboards are shut down, not all of them, there's still a Disney logo, there's still a Dunkin' Donuts, there's this heterogeneous atmosphere. It's really cacophonous. And I think about that a lot now, because as artists, we often find ourselves with opportunities to be in a super clean white cube. We get to control it, right? We get to have this sense that we're God. This is something that's great about having an art practice and being given chances to extend it. But with Midnight Moment, it's a completely different ecosystem. It's a completely different environment to really see your work in that visual field. It feels like the internet incarnate. And so I think about that a lot when I'm making my work, of trying to hone that space. Can this work be resilient, and can it create a zone for itself in that atmosphere?
Oh, you can go. I'm just thinking about the resilience. Like, that's a tall order.
You don't have to take it on. He can just be his. He can decide that resilience is the thing
I'm a
he took away.
masochist.
No, I've taken it on. I've taken it on. Yeah, I've sat in Times Square making new work, like, in the middle of the night, and
That's a picture. That's a picture. That's an intense picture. The idea of you sitting, is it like in the areas now where they have the tables and chairs because they sort of coordinate, sit there and do work at night?
In that space. I mean, when we did a Fountain for Survivors, it was 7 days. 7 days on site of us putting the work together for the first time. And things happened where we had to, like, make art decisions, out on Times Square. And I mean, I will never have that dopamine rush ever again, for better or worse. Yeah,
You can pull it out of your pocket.
but that's definitely something I keep in my pocket. The interacting with the crowd while building also. But I always think about pockets whenever I'm talking to you, because it's like your favorite word. There's always something in your pocket. You always got something. It's a treat.
I love being at Times Square. I started going to Times Square like as a kid when I was like, oh, we're not supposed to be here. We are not supposed to be here. I am confident. I don't understand a lot of what's going on. I know that we are all getting beaten. That person over there, they get a bit. My mother finds out. Everyone involved here is getting a beating, and there's just this kind of again engagement. So as a kid, my sister was nice at Centipede. I don't know if people remember Centipede. It was a video game that had that ball, and my sister was a wizard. Like, I don't know what she was top scorer, second top scorer, third top scorer, like the first 5. And we would sneak to an arcade that was there. So I think it was called Playland was the name of it. And that was like early. We would have to go past all of these adult theaters to get there and then sneak back and pretend like nothing happened. Later, I would go to 42nd Street, like as a late teen, like a freshman in college, to take pictures because I didn't have a flash. I couldn't afford a flash, and I was a night owl, so you got to make decisions. And one of them was I would do street photography at 42nd Street because I could shoot at like f8, f5.6 all day and be good and handhold. So that's what I would do at nighttime. And this idea of like the engaging, like to me, is always, that's where the energy in the work comes from. So much of the work that I do is like turning those white cubes into not white cubes in order to create a setting that people can come back to. And then it was great being there and having those 3 minutes because it's always alive. It's always teaming. Even when I felt like during lockdown it was dying down, there was a moment where we were doing the interview and I started to hear the theme song to Halloween being played and I was like, is this happening in my head? And I was like, just pretend like it's normal. Just like, no, just keep saying whatever it is. And it just kept going. And I looked over and there's a dude on a steel drum playing the theme song to Halloween. It's like, and then he mixed it live with PIMP by 50. And I was just like, I can't just pretend this is not happening. I was like, can we just wait till he finishes and keep going with this interview? And it's like, that's like what I came for.
During my midnight moment reveal, or like the reception night, it was December, I think. There was a dreidel fighting a Santa Claus, like during those 3 minutes, and I don't even think I watched. Like this, I was just like, "There's a dreidel fighting a Santa, like only in New York."
It's tough competition.
It was, yeah, it was.
So before I turn it over to the audience to ask you questions, I guess I'm just wondering, while you were at MacDowell, is there an image that stuck with you that you sort of keep in your pocket? Probably not a dreidel and a Santa Claus fighting each other. So maybe a chipmunk or black flies.
I mean, for me, this was, I think it was 17 years ago that I was at MacDowell Colony. So it was, I think of that as being like one of the final chapters of one of the first phases of my practice. And one of the, I think maybe it was James Sturm, who's a comic artist, who was also there. We were walking through the woods because I liked not walking on the street to get to dinner or whatever. He was like, have you ever seen this film, Stalker? The science fiction film by Andrei Tarkovsky? And I'd never heard of it. At that point in my life, I'd never like European films were like a category at the Oscars or something like that. That was my conception. And so it was something that I returned to a few years later when I was in a different chapter in my life, and I reflected on that. And that film is an extremely important film to me, and is, to this day, it's inspiring the work that I'm making in Montreal this month. And so, yeah, I think a lot about that as like a media touch point that makes me immediately look at the dirt.
One of the moments that there's two moments that are conflated. One is before I even got to MacDowell, I was like, I'm a city kid. So I was a little nervous about being in the woods, and I knew that MacDowell was like real woods, not like that cute like light woods. It was like woods, like bare woods. And Paul Anthony Smith said, "Yeah, man, it's great up there. You should get breakfast." And I was like at a diner or something. He was like, "No, you should wake up for their breakfast." And I was like, "Okay, yeah, what time?" It starts at 6 a.m. And I was like, I'm not waking up. I'm not doing that. It's just not happening. He was like, "Yo, it's really good." And I was like, "It's worth staying up till 7 to go get breakfast." He was like, "Yeah." And said it with like just ice cold. So I stayed up till 7. I worked until 7, and I go and I had breakfast, and it was an excellent breakfast. And I started doing it. But everyone came, like people would just come out, and it was it opened a whole world of people who were like they people. And and I got to know another Pamela Newkirk, who we eventually rode the bus home with, and the bus broke down, and we spent the entire night stuck in like a McDonald's with like hundreds of other people. And she talked to me about like interviewing Nelson Mandela. And I was like, "Yo, I've been kicking it with you for like a month and a half. And now you tell me, like we just in the Mickey D's waiting for like, AAA." She was like, "Yeah, And I was just like, that all of that is the MacDowell possibility.
Yeah, I have so many great memories. I think the one in my most immediate pocket is the memory of the traditions, like signing the house plaque, is it called? The tombstone, yeah, signing the tombstone, or like if you're the person who gets like this gift box that gets passed on, just this notion of like leaving a little treat behind and getting one from another person, that lineage, that's really like, I love tradition like that.
Did you see any of your friends or like any people that you were like, oh my God, like you really admired on your in your studio?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, people I really admired, and people who I like. I think I looked up like most of the people. I like those like yearbooks and community that lives in ephemera. Yeah.
Speaking of ritual, there's this thing at the end of panels where we do Q&As. So now I get to turn it over to you all if you have questions for them. I invite you to maybe raise your hand and share your question. I'll repeat it into the mic just for recording purposes. Questions? Yes. So let me just repeat. so maybe the question is like, what's one of the, since this isn't a typical art space, right? Like, what was a reaction that you may have witnessed, people who are not your friends, who you don't know, who did not know what they were encountering, what experience they had? There's a panoply of potential responses, so maybe you can pick one.
I found it so liberating because I am very shy, and I don't even like going to my own openings. So yeah, showing work in Times Square, you can just blend into the crowd and eavesdrop, and no one knows who you are. It's the best. It's like being a secret shopper or whatever they call it.
And they also feel like there's no way whoever's name come up, they not here. Like there's I've heard multiple people be like, they not here. There's no way they here. At midnight, mm-mm. And I just love that.
Yeah, this winter when I was there with Yoshi experiencing his midnight moment, it felt really special to be a part of that secret. Like there were actually, it was the winter, but there were quite a few. I think it was a warm night. There were a lot of people there. We went and got some coffee at the McDonald's because we had to wait till 11:57. And we got there and we're part of this big crowd, and it felt really lovely to get to celebrate in secret this person who's surrounded by all these people just being dazzled by his amazing work. Yeah.
I'll share just as a visitor, one of the things I've enjoyed is going to a midnight moment, and not on the sort of official, reception night or whatever, and running into the artist. And, the sort of like, oh my gosh, you're here. And like, okay, well, I'm wide awake because I forced myself to stay awake until midnight, so I'm super caffeinated, so now we got to go do things, right? And like sort of whisking them away at the end and being like, let's go do this other thing that I lined up so that I would stay awake. And so you can get these like really unexpected encounters, which is nice. Another question?
I have a question. Is it an open call to the artist to participate, or is it a curated thing where people invite people in? How does it work?
Oh, it's called.
Friends and I want to know.
Asking for a friend.
So the question is whether it's curated or it's an open call, and it's both. Jean, do you want to answer this?
It's both. It's an open submission process, rolling. You can submit a proposal on Slide Room, and that goes on all year. We meet with a selection committee every 4 months or so to review both open call proposals that we think could fit the program, as well as, I think, with Pamela and Kambui, it was an invitation. In that case, it's curated where we're familiar with the artist's work. We know they're making great digital work, or we have a work in mind that we think could be edited that would be really nice for the minute, and then we go through like an invitation process. But it's a mix of both.
I will also say for anyone, as in fact Jean mentioned, I cannot recommend enough going to the website and just looking at the now over 10 years, 11 some years of monthly projects. It is a beautiful array of contemporary artists and practices and concepts and aesthetics, and there's a reason I have it on my syllabus as like a way for my little BAs to be like, oh, contemporary art, like, wow. It really opens up something very dynamic. Yeah.
Peter, I know you said when creating your piece, kind of remembered you weren't playing God and thinking about Times Square as its eventual presentation. And then, as Jean was saying, for Kambui and Pamela, that was like a curated moment you were invited. If you had the chance to come back to Times Square again, what would that new midnight moment be about or surround? Have you had any ideas since presenting in Times Square of places where your art could be that wasn't previously?
Okay, so you've done one midnight moment, but now you get to do a second. What will you do?
I wanna like project down as well as on the billboards. I want it to be something that's like everywhere, like indoors and outdoors. Yeah, and like projects down on the floor and it's like inside. That's what I would do, and that's why they like, yeah, that's why you do one.
One thing that is like a secret about Midnight Moment that is secretly really complicated is like so many different people own these billboards, and so there's all this bureaucratic work that has to be done to get buy-in. But I see no reason why that can't all be connected to a single computer that is performed live. I think that would be really great for 3 minutes to actually have a little zone where that work can be performed live every night. Not by me, but where I would make that system. Yeah, that would be cool.
Whoa, that's a great idea. I think my thought was mischievous, and I was thinking about that panel also. I was like, I feel like I would make something that looks like advertisement or like breaking news or something. Like, I think I would push at what could be passable more than I did the first time.
Love that. Well, I think with that, there's still plenty of time at the end of this for you to come up and chat with them and so forth. Throw yourselves at them with all the million questions that you didn't want to ask in front of an audience. I totally get it. But thank you so much to Kambui, Pamela, and Peter for joining me tonight for this conversation. Thank you, Jean and Jean MacDowell and Times Square Arts Midnight Moment for organizing this. I can't wait for all the MacDowell conversations that are yet to come. The Midnight Moment is back there, and this is your opportunity to have some pretty fabulous people sign it if you're interested. So I highly recommend checking it out. And with that, I think we'll call it a wrap for this portion of the evening with some little mingling. And then if you want to join us, we're going to head to a Wildflower Bar go out the building to the left. It's right there. You can't miss it. And thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, MacDowell. Thank you, Chi. Thank you, Jean.
Thank you.